Right now, in South Korea, there is a legendary book called Jiyoung, born 1982. For years, this book was the ultimate manifesto, the absolute Bible for the modern woman. It was supposed to be the voice of every woman's hidden pain, describing a life of constant sacrifice under the weight of a traditional world. It sold millions of copies, became a hit movie, and was exported all over the globe as the definitive story of the female struggle. But something absolutely hilarious happened recently when someone decided to run a little social experiment. This person took the exact life story of the main character, every single detail from her apartment size to her husband's job to the specific way she spends her mornings, and posted it as a real-life anonymous cry for help on a massive, exclusive, women-only internet forum. This is a place where you have to prove your identity with a government eye just to join a fortress of female solidarity. You would expect a wave of support, right? You would expect thousands of women to jump in and say, "We feel your pain, sister," but instead the whole thing completely blew up in the most ironic way possible. The very women this book was written for looked at this life and didn't see a victim. They saw a winner. They saw someone living the dream while complaining about the fluff on her pillow. They didn't offer a shoulder to cry on, they offered a reality check. That was so brutal, it basically dismantled a decade of cultural theory in a single afternoon. Why would a group of women who normally swear by this book suddenly turn on its protagonist like a pack of hungry wolves? Well, it all comes down to the cold, hard numbers of the modern survival game. You see, the character in the book lives in a nice 3-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. In the original story, this was framed as a lonely, suffocating cage. But in the real world of today, where house prices have gone through the roof, and most young people can't even afford a studio where they can reach the stove from their bed, that apartment is a goldmine. The experiment revealed that when you strip away the sad music and the literary prose, the life of this supposed martyr looks like a luxury cruise to anyone under 30. She has a husband who works in the high-tech sector, grinding away until midnight, and pulling weekend shifts just to keep the bank account full. While he's out there acting like a human battery for a tech giant, she has her kid in a professional daycare center right downstairs from 10 in the morning until late afternoon. So, the forum users started doing the math. They realized she has hours of free time every day, in a stable home with a high-earning partner, and yet she's calling herself the most oppressed person in history. The reaction was instant. They called her ungrateful. They called her lazy. They even started pitying the husband, the very man who was supposed to be the symbol of the oppressive system. But why would these women actually demand such a harsh judgment on one of their own? The answer is buried in the ruthless reality of the current job market and the way society is actually built today. We aren't living in a world of big ideas anymore. We're living in a world of aggressive competition for a shrinking pie. For the women on that forum, many of whom are working 2 jobs or struggling to climb a corporate ladder that feels like it's made of glass and grease, the idea of a woman staying at home in a large apartment is not a tragedy, it's a trophy. They look at her life and they don't see the chains of the past, they see the freedom they will never have. The problem here is that the people who wrote these stories about the female struggle are still living in the mid-2000s, but the people reading them are stuck in a hyper-capitalist pressure cooker. In this environment, every person is judged by how much they contribute and how much they endure. If you are perceived as having an easy deal, the community will turn on you, regardless of your gender or your politics. They feel that if she is a victim, then their own much harder, much more exhausted lives must be a living nightmare that they aren't ready to admit to. It's a defense of their own hard work. They have to believe she's lucky, because if she's not, then there's no hope for anyone else. So, what does this tell us about the way our culture is changing? It shows that the foundation of our social dynamics has shifted. From what we believe to how much we have. We used to talk about rights and fairness, but now we only talk about who has it easier. The experiment proved that the modern world has created a new kind of hierarchy, where the greatest sin isn't being an oppressor, but being a fake victim. People are so tired and so stressed about their bank accounts that they have lost the ability to feel for someone who seems to have a safety net. This is why the conversation about gender is becoming so toxic and so focused on the tiny details of who pays for what and who works more hours. We have moved from a society that looks at the big picture to a society that carries a calculator in its pocket at all times. Everything is a transaction. Every relationship is a balance sheet. And if the numbers don't add up, the empathy disappears. But wait, it gets even more ridiculous when you look at how this backfired on the very movement that started it. For years, the story of Jiyoung was used to show that even if a woman has a perfect life, she can still be miserable because of the way the world is organized. But when real women were asked to judge that life without knowing it was from a famous book, they basically said, if you're miserable with a house and a rich husband and free time, you're just the problem. They completely rejected the idea that the world is to blame for her unhappiness. They blamed her character. They blamed her lack of perspective. This is the ultimate irony. The very people who were supposed to be liberated by this narrative ended up using the logic of the most cutthroat capitalism to tear it apart. They basically said that as long as your material needs are met, you have no right to complain. It's a complete reversal of the original goal. Instead of creating understanding, it created a new standard of shut up and be thankful you have a roof over your head. So, what happened when they finally got everything they asked for? What happens when the world actually changes, but the complaints stay the same? That's where the real hypocrisy kicks in. The women on the forum represent a generation that has more rights, more education, and more career opportunities than any generation before them. They are exactly what the activists of the past were fighting for, but instead of feeling powerful, they feel cheated. They feel like they were sold a dream of having it all that just means working twice as hard for half as much. And when they see someone like the character in the book who seems to have skipped the hard part and gone straight to the stable home part, they don't see a sister. They see a traitor who is bragging about her easy life under the guise of a complaint. The cold logic of the market doesn't care about your feelings, it only cares about your value. And in the eyes of these women, the value of a stay-at-home mother in a $500,000 apartment is so high that any complaint she makes sounds like a joke. Think about how this looks from the outside. Imagine a person in a fancy restaurant crying because their expensive wine is a little too cold. Now imagine the waiter who is working a double shift and hasn't eaten all day watching them cry. Is the waiter going to feel bad for them? Of course not. They're going to be annoyed. That's exactly what happened on this forum. The waiters of the modern economy, the women working in offices and stores and factories, watched a customer of the old school dream cry about her life and they lost it. This isn't just a Korean thing either. You see this everywhere now. Look at the way people react to influencers or people who post about their quiet life on social media. There is a growing rage against anyone who seems to have more time or more peace than the average person. We have reached a point where leisure itself is seen as an insult. The most cynical part of all this is how it effectively kills the possibility of anyone actually helping anyone else. If we are all just waiting to pounce on each other for having a slightly better deal, how can we ever agree on anything? The social experiment didn't just expose a book, it exposed a hole in the way we connect with each other. We are so busy checking each other's receipts that we don't notice the whole building is on fire. We are fighting over who gets to sit near the window while the roof is collapsing. This is the future we've built, a world where every story is a lie until proven otherwise, and every cry for help is just a hidden attempt to show off. In the end, the whole situation is like a mirror that was supposed to show us our flaws, but ended up showing us how much we hate looking at each other. The book was meant to be a way to see the cracks in the wall, but now that the house is burning down, no one cares about the cracks. They only care about who has the exit key. When the Kim Jiyoung story was brought into the digital world, it didn't spark a revolution. It sparked a riot of jealousy. It showed that we are so overwhelmed by our own survival that the problems of the past look like the rewards of the present. The ultimate mockery is that the liberated women of today would probably trade their freedom in a heartbeat for that 3-bedroom apartment and a husband who pays all the bills, even if it meant they had to be a character in a sad book. They would take the suffering if it came with the security. And that's the real kicker. We've reached a point where the things we used to call oppression are now the things we pray for. We want the stability, we want the house, we want the partner who works hard for the family. But because those things are becoming impossible to get, we have to pretend we don't want them. Or we have to attack anyone who has them. It's a weird, twisted way of protecting our own hearts from the realization that the world is just getting harder for everyone. We're not fighting for a better future. We're just fighting to make sure no one else is having a better time than we are. It's petty, it's brutal, and it's the most honest look at our society we've had in a long time. The experiment didn't just fail to find empathy, it proved that empathy is a luxury we can no longer afford. When you're drowning, you don't care if the person next to you is crying about their wet hair, you just want their life jacket. Fuel the truth at Dating in Korea, support the structure, stay safe in the lounge.